So lesson number 1 is actually about 2 units of measurement that we use to measure circles. So RAD is the abbreviation for something called a radian. DEG is a unit of measurement called a degree. Most of us are familiar with degrees. We have probably heard in our previous math class that there are 360 degrees in a circle. So it's kind of the same thing with the radian, it's just a different name. So the same thing for 360 degrees, 2 pi radians is what you can also use to measure a circle. So it's very much like how pennies are used to measure amounts of money. Dimes are also used to measure amount of money. So degrees and radians are 2 different units you can use to measure the same thing. And just kind of like going off of this fact, if you have 360 degrees for the full circle, we can easily just kind of come up with some other radians off the top of our head. So if I wanted to take like half of that, like 180 degrees, if you think about that, taking half of this is going to be, instead of 2 radians, it's going to be 1 pi radian. So that's also a really important number that you need to know. And then I could take this in half again. I could call this 90 degrees. And 90 degrees, if I want to take half of 1, that would be 1/2 of a radian. Now, the thing about fractions is that you have to be mindful of how they are written in radians. So you're never going to see it written with the pi off to the side. Instead of 1/2, they're going to put that pi in the numerator. So it kind of should read like this: 1 pi over 2. But we know that the ones don't really matter when we're dealing with multiplication and stuff like that. And then we could even take it one step further. If I wanted to do 45 degrees, I could take half of this to make 45 degrees, and I could take half of this, and that would be 1/4, or we would call that pi over 4. So the 2 conversions that you need is this first one in red, so that's pi over 180, and that is if you want to if you are already in a degree and you want to change it to a radian. And then the other one is when you flip it, so it kind of makes sense if you're flipping the fraction, you're doing the reciprocal or you're doing the inverse. This one is going to take your current radian and it is going to make it change into a degree. So a couple of examples from the lesson, it goes in detail over the math about the 90 degrees, but I just like to do things like with intuition, because sometimes that just makes more sense than all of the theories behind it. So we're going to look at some of the try it section. So we've got an example, 270 degrees. 270 degrees is not one of the ones you can just kind of think about. So if you already are in degrees, so this is 270 degrees, this is our symbol for degrees, and I want to go from a degree to a radian. I love you too, baby. I am simply going to take your red marker. Here. Can you hold on to this one for mommy? Thank you. So I want to change my 270 degrees into a radian. So I am going to multiply. It is very important that you are actually multiplying. I use this fraction, pi over 180. Now, technically, we do not need a calculator. We can do this simplification without. So I'm going to go ahead and do the simplification without. If I'm multiplying fractions, I do need to make sure my 270 is over 1 so I can make it a fraction. And then I can just kind of do my math. So I know from previous math classes, I got a 0. And the top and bottom I can cancel. No, sweetheart. I love you. Good, bye-bye. Go play. Bye-bye. Go play. Here you go, baby. Oh, dear. Okay, so I was saying think that you can simplify the fraction so it was 270. Since there's a 0 and the numerator and a 0 somewhere in the denominator, those cancel out. Then that leaves you with 27 pi over 18. Again, use your mental math if you can. You're looking for, so you're just reducing this fraction. So 27 and 18, you can divide both of those by 9. So 27 divided by 9 is, so I'm going to just put divided by 9, divided by 9. That's going to be 3. 18 divided by 9 is going to give you 2. And then you still have your pi. So 3 pi over 2 is what the actual answer is for 270 degrees. So 270 degrees is equal to 3 pi over 2. Please make sure when you are dealing with your pi symbol, do not try to use a calculator for that part. Only use the calculator for the whole numbers. You're going to treat this symbol like you would treat any other variable. So the fact that pi is a number does not matter for any of this stuff. Treat it like any other variable. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. So this time we're going to look at 3 pi over 2. So I can tell already that this is a radian. It is very important to know that radians have a pi inside of, has a pi that's already there. So since my pi is already there, I'm currently in radians. Radians have pi's. So if I want to take it from a radian to a degree, I'm going to multiply by this fraction. So I'm going to multiply, uh-oh, my marker is dying. Multiply, maybe this one is working, this one's not working. Okay, let's give this one a go. Multiply by this fraction, the one that's going to be used for radians, 2 degrees, by 180. Nope, no go. No luck, you guys. 180 over pi. So same thing. You want to look for some easy things that you can cancel. So there's a pi up top and there's a pi down the bottom. So remember, the pi up top is already there because it was a radian. We're multiplying by this conversion factor, and it's really nice because it makes these pi's cancel out very nicely. So now I'm looking at just the fraction 3 over 2 times 180. And once again, since you are multiplying fractions, you want to make sure put a 1 underneath it. Child. Come back to the math. Come back to the math. Woo, child. This is real bad. And feel free to multiply and simplify these fractions any way you know how. I think it's a little bit easier for me to simplify before I try to multiply because I just personally like to work with the smaller numbers. So I'm going to take this 2 and this 180. So I'm going to do what's called cross simplifying. Okay, so for me, I know that 2 goes into itself 1 time, and I know that 2 is going to go into 180. I know that's going to happen, and it's going to give me 90. So now the only thing I'm looking at this point is 3 times 90. And I can easily just pick up my calculator from here, and that is going to equal 270. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Here, hold that. Thank you. Okay, so the moral of the story is it's not that bad of a story. 3 pi over 2 is the same thing as 270 degrees. There are a bunch of examples that they put at the bottom of the learn it section that kind of goes through the same thing.